What up, perps? Kid Copious, back in effect. Purple State Party, you know what we're doing here? We're repping America, the center, and common sense. This week's word is his letter is W. Man, there were too many W's. It did my brain in. So let's see what we managed to dig up and get this thing rolling. So one thing that I've always tried to do with Purple State here is, I want to provide like some middle of the road context, I guess, to some of these stories. Try to look at things from a non-tribal way. I don't really have a tribe. I think I disagree with the Democrats equally as much as I disagree with the Republicans, especially on some pretty key issues. But, one of the news stories that's going around right now is that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has shut down because of cuts from Trump. Now, first of all, I understand Trump's a Republican, and, a lot of these public broadcasting, NPR, PBS, things like that, have really shifted left. And that was never the purpose of them. Their purpose was to be purple, to have honest debates, to provide context to news stories. Now, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting shutting down really doesn't affect PBS. PBS likes to say that they get 1% of their money from the federal government. But the reality is that they're getting it from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which gets the money from the government. CPB is just like a middleman. So I don't think it's going to affect much. I am a proponent of public television. I still watch a lot of stuff off antenna. I don't have to use an antenna per se, but these are channels that are available on antenna. And I think it is a vital source. Sesame Street shows like that, it's fine. And I don't mind if they want to push a little bit, of what people would call woke or the left-wing agenda, because not all of it is far left. It's, it's fine. It'll be okay. But these shots had to be fired because we can't have the majority of our media acting as propaganda. And people can fire back and say, oh, well, what about Fox News? Well, okay, that's one. All right, what about all the rest of them that are out there that just spout the left-wing viewpoint? And really in particular, the thing that bothers me is the fact that they'll just gloss over the mistakes made by the Democrats or by the liberals. We're going to look at a few of those as we go through this week. Anyhow, so, a lot has been made about how the UK and France have decided that they're going to recognize Palestine. In fact, the UK took it a step further and said that unless Israel agrees to a ceasefire, they will recognize Palestine. That's letting the terrorists win. That is that left-wing weakness that just disgusts me about that party. Because meanwhile, Arab states call on Hamas to disarm and relinquish power in unprecedented move. Arab and Muslim states, including Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, have for the first time issued a joint call for Hamas to disarm and relinquish power in the Gaza Strip as part of the efforts to end the war in the territory. The 22-member Arab League, the entire European Union, and 17 other countries backed a declaration signed at the UN conference co-hosted by Saudi Arabia and France on Tuesday. I don't really understand how they co-hosted it. Do they provide the food? I don't know. Who brings the fruit punch? The meeting in New York aimed to address the peaceful settlement of the question of Palestine and the implementation of a two-state solution. Well, all you got to do is look at history. All right, the two-state solution has been proposed many times and always rejected by the Palestinians, the Arabs, whoever it was, okay? Because they don't want two states. They want one state. They want their state, and they want Israel gone, and they want the people of Israel dead. So it makes it kind of difficult to see how this is going to go forward. But I think they're taking the right steps. One of the things that the joint document said was governance, law enforcement, and security across all Palestinian territory must lie solely with the Palestinian Authority with appropriate international support. In the context of ending the war in Gaza, Hamas must end its rule in Gaza and hand over its weapons to the Palestinian Authority with international engagement and support in line with the objectives of a sovereign and independent Palestinian state. The reason why Israel's behind this is because as soon as Gaza or whatever chunks of land we turn into Palestine, you can slap up a giant border. Now any incursions are viewed as a hostile nation on nation. It can be dealt with differently. Also in New York, and I think very importantly, the text also condemned the deadly October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel and proposed the deployment of temporary international stabilization mission. In other words, the UN wants to send in troops. I don't see how that would hurt. A lot of times the UN is very ineffective, but maybe this time around, maybe they'll get their shit together. Maybe they've learned from the past. But yeah, we need to keep that in mind, that Hamas, the leader of Gaza, the supposed leader of Palestine that people are supporting, went in, raped, murdered, made people watch as their loved ones were raped and murdered. They were cruel and just absolutely savage. What they did to fly into the Nova Music Festival and attack those people, they should not be rewarded. But at the same time, we need to end this. Look at the borders that Gaza has with Egypt. There's 2 separate sets of fences and walls, keeping the people out of Egypt. Why? Because these people, from their earliest education, have been brainwashed to hate the West, to hate the Jews. And the problem is that then if you integrate into Egypt, it's like what we saw we're seeing in Britain and in France, where these newcomers want nothing to do with the traditional British or French values. They want their own shit. They don't want to follow their laws. They want to follow the laws that they bring with them, Sharia law, and some of their laws about consent and forced marriages and things like that. You know, the funny part about this whole thing is that the UK, the British Prime Minister, comes out and says that unless Israel accepts a ceasefire, they're going to recognize the Palestinian state. The British government is siding with Hamas, but 86% of British respondents oppose that position. That's the thing that bothers me about the political parties, especially here in America, where we only have really 2. They disregard what people say. They don't look at if I had a piece of paper that told me that 86% of my constituents wanted me to do something, that's what I would do. I wouldn't oppose them. Only 14% somewhat or wholly support recognizing Palestine. Well, that should tell you something. And one of the reasons why is because when you strip away political tribalism, people realize something about this Palestinian situation, turning Gaza into Palestine. There's zero proof that they could successfully run a government, but there's even more proof that they can't. So yay, let's rally behind the creation of a likely oppressive regime, a regime that's likely going to strip women's rights away and is hostile, even violent to the LGBT community, and at the end of the day, will continue to hate Israel and seek their destruction. One of the common sense people over the Netherlands, they went right, they swung right this election. One of their leaders came out and said, when we talk about Palestine, we're talking about the old British held lands. They got them from the Ottomans. It was called Palestine. It was kind of it was taken from the Roman Empire, who bastardized Philistines into Palestine, whatever. But 77% of that land is now Jordan. So the idea of Palestine doesn't really exist. If we want to just take chunks of land and call it Palestine, that's fine. But let's do it in a way that makes sense. Let's not do it in a way that rewards the terrorists. The terrorists have to go. The Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, Al-Qaeda, even the Taliban. Keep in mind that when you take the Muslim way of law to its extreme, you end up with what we see with the Taliban in Afghanistan. Women are not allowed to listen to other women. And don't get it fooled. Don't get fooled by this. Here in our country, a lot of the Muslims vote very progressive. They're not progressive people. They don't drink alcohol. They have lots of rules on women, and they really, really, really don't like the LGBT community. We saw it in Michigan where the city council there removed all the pride flags, and nobody batted an eye because, you vote with those people. Well, they're doing it as a deception. They're voting with and for the people who will allow them to get away with the shit that they want to get away with. Now, I'm not indicting all of them, but the proof that I see is that these countries and these communities are not run in a way that is concurrent with American way of thinking. They don't value freedom the same way that we do. And what are we going to set up over there? On Israel's doorstep and on Egypt's doorstep and on Jordan's doorstep. We're going to set up another effed up government that's just going to oppress people and want to attack anything connected to Western society. How is that going to work? Look, the people over there just want to get rich selling their oil. They don't need all of this shit happening on the side. But it's good to see that we're finally making some progress, at least recognizing the issue lies with Hamas. That's nice. I think it's a step in the right direction, but we got to see how it plays out. Well, California has dodged a bullet. You know, Kamala's not running for governor. I support that wholeheartedly. I'm so glad she's out of it. I don't mind Democrats at all. What I mind is what we saw during the 4 years of Biden, and we've seen in the years surrounding all of that, that left-wing ideas are forced down people's throats, even though there's a lot of proof that it doesn't work. You know, I had an argument with my daughter about their approach, the Democrats' approach to crime. And she said, well, locking them up doesn't work either. Well, neither does letting them go. But one solution removes them from society. It makes them less of a problem to society. And that's what our government is supposed to be doing, is looking at the problems that actually affect our society, that don't affect a small portion or a minority of people. The homelessness problem, the crime problem in California is rampant. No matter how they want to juice the stats, you know, that's what they do. You know, the FBI comes out and says, well, look, crime's down. But then California doesn't report their crime figures to the FBI. We've created a situation where we have given the government all the tools to literally just gaslight us. And Kamala Harris, I think, was one of those people. She was a gaslighter, and she would not be good for California. California needs to move forward with a more moderate approach, but more on that. More of that. You know, we need people to come forward with workable ideas. That's what we need. We're going to look at one right now that, you know, this covers 2 W's, workable ideas and waste. You know, a report came out about Boondoggles, okay? And it's not just the high-speed rail here in California. Right now, taxpayers are on the hook for $163 billion in delayed infrastructure boondoggles. The senator from Iowa, Joni Ertz, okay? She identified 13 taxpayer-funded infrastructures that are over budget. And, you know, one of them, the tip of the iceberg, of course, is the high-speed rail. And, you know, one of the things that she brought up is the parameters for how we're going to label these things as wasteful boondoggles. $1 billion over budget, 5 years behind schedule. There you go. I mean, look at the high-speed rail. It was supposed to be done in 2020, and it's now $95 billion over budget. That's a lot of money. I know we like to. We're going to put into some context here in a minute about how much of some of these boondoggles cost, but there are 13, at least 13 right now, that they're looking to chop and claw back that taxpayer money. One of the people who was involved here, I don't see the name, Duffy. Wow. Not really good at this, am I? If you're receiving taxpayer dollars, you should be expected to be held accountable by the American people. No more boondoggles. That's what Duffy said. Thank you, Senator Ertz, for your leadership in Congress to ensure federal dollars are being used effectively and efficiently. There you go. I mean, we can, as Democrats, Republicans, independents, people in the middle, we can argue about what we need to do, okay? but we should be able to agree that it needs to be done effectively and efficiently. Continuing on here, Joni Ertz from Iowa. She says it's no coincidence that a bulk of the troubled infrastructure projects are located in California, where former Speaker of the State Assembly Willie Brown once boasted about deploying bait-and-switch budgeting tactics to secure taxpayer funding for doomed infrastructure projects. And this is what Willie Brown wrote in 2013 in an op-ed piece. In the world of civic projects, the first budget is really just a down payment. If people knew the real cost from the start, nothing would ever get approved. The idea is to get going, start digging a hole, and make it so big that there's no alternative to coming up with the money to fill it in. That's that sunk cost that we've talked about here. Let's plow ahead to the point where, it just makes more sense to finish it. Well, the high-speed rail hasn't even gone anywhere. In all of this time and with all of these budget overruns, we need to end that. We cannot survive when our government is primarily interested in making themselves and their circle richer. And that's what we're seeing. We're going to look at it. Here's a couple more just to kind of talk about with some of these other boondoggles. There's $5.1 billion in unspent federal funds that the Biden administration committed to the Silicon Valley Subway Extension Project. It was originally priced at $4.7 billion in 2018, with passenger service beginning in 2026. The price tag is now up to $12.8 billion, and its completion date is 2039. Why? Why? Why such a discrepancy in cost, and why such a discrepancy in time? Would you tolerate that? No. We, the citizens, are tired of that. You go to buy a $40 concert ticket. By the time they add on all the fees, it's $60. And then what? They just delay it and they say, well, the concert will be here sometime. Is that something that you're willing to accept? Because I don't think you'd accept that in your personal life. So why do you accept it out of your government? And do you accept it out of your government simply because they're on your team? They're part of your tribe? Because that's not a way to run a successful country. And here's another. They were talking about the Silicon Valley and the Trump administration, Ertz, I'm sorry. The train hasn't even left the station yet, and it's already a boondoggle. The Trump administration should consider canceling the federal support and save $5.1 billion. Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great? The more money the government gets back, maybe the lower our taxes will be. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe we'll get a rebate. I don't know. Federal taxpayers could save another $3.4 billion if the Trump administration cancels a Biden-era commitment to San Francisco Transit project that doubled in budget from $4.5 billion in 2015 to $8.3 billion. Well, that's what they do. Do you not see do people not see the pattern? They start these projects, they get delayed, and delay equals more money. Oh, we need to pay more consultants. We need to pay for this study and this study and this study. Meanwhile, a bunch of rich people are getting richer, and we're not getting any of the services that we were promised. But they need to make up for that loss of money somehow. So they raise our taxes, or they raise fees on this, or fees on that. Taxpayers and the rest of the country shouldn't be forced to bail out Golden State gravy trains because bureaucrats in Washington are so easily bamboozled by California's boondoggle budgeting. Yeah. Now, I get it. California pays a lot in federal taxes. We pay for other states. You could claim that all you want. I don't care. Oh, we're the fourth largest economy. Okay, if we're the fourth largest economy in the world, why do we need federal tax dollars? To swindle the people and get politicians and their cronies rich? Here's another project in Hawaii. It ballooned by $4.8 billion over the original cost, estimated at $9.9 billion. The Honolulu Rail Transit project was also delayed by at least 11 years. It was supposed to be done in 2020, and now it's 2031. This is being used to swindle money and to create false jobs. Ertz said here, every dollar sunk into one of these billion-dollar boondoggles is a missed opportunity to support other initiatives that could better serve taxpayers at a fraction of the cost. Here's where it gets interesting. The $10 billion needed to complete the Hawaii Rail project is equivalent to nearly half of the state's entire budget for a year. A year. You could run Hawaii's government for 6 months, or you could keep funneling that money into a train. They're on an island. I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand why we fall for this. The only reason it exists, though, is because everybody wants to get, behind their tribe. They don't want to speak out against their tribe. They don't, no matter how much they're screaming in their head that this is wrong, they're willing to go along with their tribe. It's ridiculous. Here's when I liked it, because it was the Washington, D.C. subway purple line. Yeah, I like that. It was originally budgeted at $2.4 billion, but is now estimated to cost $5.5 billion. Okay, see, I would understand if it went up to $3 billion. And like, okay, yeah, we ran into a few snags. I get that. But these aren't snags. This is doubling the cost of something. And then it's not getting done on time. So it really makes you wonder what is going on. And the only answer is that it's a swindle. That's it, pure and simple. One of the biggest swindles we have, I think right now, is the amount of attention and money that's being wasted on green energy. We know nuclear is the answer to this, to offset as much gas, natural gas, oil, coal, all that shit, right? But we've concocted this world where if the pollution happens somewhere else, it doesn't count against us. And California is one of the leaders in that. Right now, we have 2 major refineries that are shut down in California. Other oil companies are thinking of leaving. California is panicking to the point where they're easing restrictions, and they're trying to get companies to come in and buy these refineries because they know what's going to happen. They want us to drive electric cars. They want us to live off solar and wind. All of those things come with environmental costs. Those things take a toll on the environment, but not in California, so it doesn't really count. Bullshit. Come on, you can't believe that. Just because your tribe says it, don't believe it. The truth of the matter is that California produces less than 1% of the world pollution. So even if we shut down, what does that do? We would literally have to shut our entire state down and just literally eat raw food and walk everywhere. And we would only see possibly a 1% reduction in the greenhouse gases. And then what do we do to get our gas now that these refineries are done? We're going to buy it from places like India, which gets it from Russia. We're going to support enemies of the United States. We're going to put it on dirty diesel burning ships and truck it over here. And where is it going to get refined? Somewhere else? It's going to get refined somewhere else. So it's just going to be more expensive. And at the end of the day, it's not going to make any difference. It's barely a blip in the whole greenhouse gas and fossil fuel pollution. But yet, California has enough oil underground to supply about 80% of our need. Okay? Maybe Nevada and Arizona will have to start buying their gas somewhere else, because if we start producing our own, we might not have enough to send to them. But we could drill it as clean as possible. We could refine it as clean as possible. We could build pipelines to deliver it more efficiently. Pipelines don't require giant diesel trucks to pull it everywhere. It doesn't require giant diesel-powered boats to ship it everywhere. But no, because we are so wedded to one way of thinking in this state, and we are. Lots of people don't really understand this, but the California Assembly has been a Democrat majority since 1970, and the Senate has been democratically controlled since 1975. These are Democrat policies. This is kowtowing to environmentalists and climate change activists without looking at the actual facts. The actual facts of the matter is we can make very little difference on a worldwide scale, especially when we're having other people drill the oil and transport it all the way over to us. That still counts towards the world. We need to start looking at it that way. We need to start realizing that places like California juice the details. Oh, well, that oil production doesn't count because even though it was for us, it was done in another country. Or, oh, well, we're going to reduce crime by reducing what we define as a serious crime. That was one of the problems we saw in the ICE raids. They say, well, we'll turn over, serious criminals to ICE, but a guy that was dealing fentanyl, right? He was busted for dealing fentanyl. He's walking the streets. They never turned him over to ICE. A guy had over 60 arrests, never turned over to ICE because they're not serious crimes. Well, how is not dealing fentanyl not a serious crime? How is having India refine Russian gas and then ship it over here, how is that not polluting the planet? How is that not supporting Russia? Oh, well, California doesn't buy its gas from Russia. No, you use a middleman? Does that really make any difference? I don't think it makes any difference. I really don't. And, I think that's the only way one of the ways that we're going to turn the tide here is if we stop being so aligned to one group or the other. Yeah, I don't know. So, the only W I really had that was of any real importance to me were words to live by. These are a few sayings that I use over and over again. And I just want to put them out there. I don't know. Whatever. Take it or leave it. One of the things I like to say is you can't break down on the road at midnight if you're not on the road at midnight. And what that means is think about what you're doing. Think about the overall plan. Don't get caught up in the moment and rush off and do something stupid. In this, especially in this state, with the way the homeless population is all over the place and people are out doing street takeovers and stuff like that at night, really consider what you're going to do. Consider how you're getting from A to B. And is it really worth it? Is that risk really worth it? Because unfortunately, that's the world we live in now. They can lie all they want. They can manipulate their crime stats however they want. But they're never going to convince me that the cities in Los Angeles, San Francisco are safe. It's too goddamn random right now. You need to really think about it. Another saying I use a lot is be yourself or be nobody. And that's very important to me because lying to yourself leads to lots of other problems. Lying to yourself really, I think, was one of the motivating factors behind my drug addictions and my alcoholism. I didn't like who I was. There was kind of a version of myself that I saw, and I wasn't living up to it. And I realized that what I had to do was I had to be myself. I couldn't keep masking and lying and trying to pretending to be this person that I wasn't. And I also had to realize that maybe I wasn't going to be the person that I envisioned. And I had to get happy with the person that I am. Because if you can't live with yourself, then, I mean, we already know the host of problems that leads to. And, and that's my position on trans people, too. If that's who you are, that's who you are. Same thing with gay people. That's who you are. Okay, that's fine. Same thing with religions. I don't care as long if what religion you are, as long as it's not affecting other people, society as a whole. I don't really care. That's who you are. At least you have that identity. Another one too that I always like to, and I saw this one time on Instagram, long time ago. I'd rather look poor but be rich than look rich and be poor. Don't fake it. Don't put yourself in debt just to get a fancy car. Save that money. Make better choices with your money. To people who are significantly younger than me out there, the one thing I regret the most in life is that I didn't start saving and investing in my retirement at an earlier age. It was different for me. We didn't have easy access to things like 401ks and corporations paying into them and stuff like that. But yeah, man, life moves really quick. So think about that. If you could save yourself $1,000 a month by just driving a car that's more within your means, you should do that because That money could be put into your retirement. And at the end of the day, when you're all done with work, you're going to want to be able to enjoy your life. Yeah. And lastly, I think one of the most important things, especially here on Purple State Party, vote with your head, not your heart. You know, a lot of us, myself included, we voted for Trump because what was our option? Kamala Harris, who was going to continue the Biden agenda, that was, in all honesty, a failure. Everything about the last administration was pretty much a failure. I can't think of one thing that really went well or has changed things for the better. We need better candidates. That's one thing. Well, one of the things that I said way back when in 2020 was, before you vote against Trump, look at who you're voting for. You might not like a person, but if they're qualified, if they're going to put out, for the most part, reasonable, workable ideas, then you got to vote for them. This isn't a personality contest. Electing a president or a governor or a senator is not about picking a best friend. It's about picking a person who's going to run the ship the right way. We don't need captains of our ships pointing the ship right at the rocks and going full speed ahead. And we go, well, he said it, so it must be a good idea. No, we need to start thinking for ourselves. We need to start using our head and looking at what are going to be the long-term results from all of this. Really quickly, that's one of the things we have to accept about the tariffs. Our prices have now gone up. They're going to stay up. Get used to the new norm on costs for things. But in the long run, the money that comes in from the tariffs might just actually lower our taxes or improve our country as a whole, because we may have the money to do the things that need to be done. And one of those things is we need to solve the homeless / drug addicted / mentally ill problem. We need effective solutions to those. We need to try to save as many people as we can. And the ones that aren't, we need to remove them from society. That's just what we have to do. That's how we need to start looking at all of these so-called political things. If it's a bad idea, if it doesn't pass the sniff test, get it the hell out of here. Thank you for your time. I'm not really trying to advocate for any one side. I am trying to figure out the answers here in the middle. I welcome comments, things like that. And, please subscribe. Come back next week. I'm King Copious. I'm Purple State Party. And so are you. Love one another. Keep on grinding. It's a good form of exercise. Let's dance it out.